Hi, everyone's going to feel shame at some point and everyone is going to feel guilt. That's just part of being a human being. Even though it doesn't feel good, they're not pleasant things to feel. They are unfortunately sometimes a byproduct of being a person and being alive. But when shame and guilt are used as a tool to control you, well, that's where we start to make scapegoats. So we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. Hi, my name is Olivia, and I'm passionate about helping you understand relational trauma so you can heal and grow and move on from it. Today, everything is coming from my book. This one is A Scapegoat No More Forever. You can find it on Amazon. I will put a QR code on the screen. There's a link in the description, and there's also a full course available to anyone who wants to walk through the whole thing with me. I'm happy to go through that with you. Today, we're looking at shame and guilt and how they're used as tools to control you, and that is part of what makes a scapegoat. So we said before, it's a normal part of life to feel shame and guilt, and everyone's going to experience it to some degree, but also they can be used as tools to control you, and that's what makes a scapegoat. So if we're looking at just shame and guilt, so shame can be defined as a pain that you experience over a humiliation. So anytime that you're dealing with being humiliated, you can humiliate yourself. You can be humiliated by another person. When you feel that pain, because it is painful, that is the pain of shame. And, again, you could do it like put your foot in your mouth, be too big for your britches. Those types of things can make you feel, dumb, and it's embarrassing, it's humiliating, and it hurts. And that's regular old shame. And it's painful, but in John Bradshaw's book, Healing the Shame That Binds You, he talks about how it can be life nourishing, because if you take that into account and you face yourself and you face that experience and you talk about that pain, it can actually help you grow. It can stretch you. It can, humble you in a good way. It can make you more well-rounded. It can make you more grounded. It can make you more empathetic, can make you more understanding. So it really can nourish your life. It's not all shame is bad, although it's going to feel bad no matter what. But coming out the other end of it, it can give you some, dividends. Toxic shame, on the other hand, is life destroying always. There's not anything good that's going to come from that toxic shame. And there's a couple of ways. So we said regular shame is when, you humiliate yourself, which, you could do that. Or someone humiliates you through a number of ways. Like, I'm sure you guys have all your examples. We probably all have examples for days. And a lot of times it goes back to childhood, which is not funny. But it just does. You're rehashing things that happened to you, in the classroom lunchroom, or the class lunch, or the school lunchroom, or the classroom. That's what I was trying to say. But toxic shame is when someone is trying to make you feel ashamed when there's nothing for you to be ashamed over. So if they're like, shame on you, you should be ashamed of yourself. And you're thinking like, yeah, but I'm not. I'm not. And that could be true. It could be not true. It could be bad. It could, not be bad. It really just depends. But it's when someone is trying to evoke shame in you, it can be toxic for you. Another one is if someone tells let's say a joke, and you're in a group of people, and it's so embarrassing and it's so inappropriate, and they have no shame. So they are just shameless, right? Which, if you're kind of thinking about narcissism, they can come off as though they're shameless, but they tend to have a lot of shame. So someone tells this joke, and it's kind of like that shame is just hanging in the air, waiting for them to grab it and own it, but they don't. And so we're so uncomfortable, and it's unnerving. And so we're like, ha, 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 and we try to cover it over by making light of it or co-signing on it, even though we do not agree with it, right? That's us picking up their shame, and now we're carrying it, and that can become toxic for us. So if you're taking on someone else's shame, part of how it's toxic is that you're not resolving it because it wasn't your behavior. It wasn't for you to, correct. You can acknowledge the shame someone heaps on you, and you can resolve that by talking about the behavior and the pain. But when you're just constantly taking someone else's shame in, it does become toxic for you. And with guilt, so let's talk about guilt. So we have regular old guilt, and then you have toxic guilt. So when you have regular guilt, that's when you've, stepped over boundaries with yourself, like your own moral compass, or a societal standard that you're not supposed to be doing, that this is wrong. It's a wrong way to treat somebody. It's a wrong thing to do. And you do it anyway, which all of us have at some point and probably will again, unfortunately. But when you do that, that feeling you feel for having done something wrong and you know it, that is guilt. And it's healthy. When you feel bad for doing something wrong to someone else, especially, it's important that we feel guilt because that helps us to correct our behavior. Think about raising kids. You don't want to send your kids in a world where nobody feels guilty when they do bad things to each other. That would be scary, right? So we want guilt. It doesn't feel good because it's not supposed to feel good. It's a corrective emotion that helps us, to live a life that is healthy and loving and honest. So toxic guilt comes when someone's, same thing, trying to make you feel guilty when you haven't done anything, trying to make you feel bad for how you are or who you are or what you are, when it's not bad because you haven't done what they said you have done, or you didn't do it with the intentions they're implying you have done it with. So that's how it becomes toxic, because you can't resolve it because it's not real. So when you accept that and you take that in and internalize it, then it just like settles with us. It's not something we kind of think about, process through, let go and move on. It just kind of starts bogging us down, and it's like building up like sediments, right? Like a glass of water. You drop all these little pieces of gravel and sand, and over time it just kind of settles. But you keep doing that, pretty soon you're gonna have very little water and you're gonna have a whole bunch of gravel and sand in a cup. And that's sort of like what that cup becomes, rather than a cup of water with a little bit of sand. Now it's a cup of sand or a cup of gravel. So thinking of that, now put all that into perspective of a scapegoat. There tends to be a person in the house who is shameless. They don't have any shame. They're not feeling, bad for a humiliation they're causing someone else, or they're not at least owning the bad that they're doing. They're not owning the bad that they're feeling. They're not talking about the pain they're experiencing along with the behavior. Sometimes you might talk about the experience, but not the pain, or the pain, but not the experience. And you really got to do both. So with a scapegoat, if you are constantly taking on someone else's shame, you are constantly having to deal with that toxic guilt, then what happens is those sort of become, for lack of a better way to express it, our primary emotions. So now I have this filter of toxic shame and toxic guilt, and every emotion and experience I'm having is filtering through toxic shame and toxic guilt. So this is where I can feel guilty over having fun. I can feel guilty over spending money that I've even saved for this thing. I can feel bad about somebody wanting to spend time with me. All these things that just don't make any sense. Like, what? Why in the world would you feel bad about that? Why would you feel guilty over that? So now I'm apologizing for everything because I'm feeling like everything is my fault, because that's that lens through which I experience all emotions and experiences through. So everything's coming out through that lens and that filter. And it's really unfortunate, because if this is my go-to, and this is how I'm living, and this is how I'm experiencing life, then I'm really going to limit myself to good things. I'm not going to go for promotions. I'm not going to own anything well that I do. I'm not going to take any type of credit for it, which is not to say to have like a big head and become an egomaniac. It's just saying like, yeah, this is what I did, and this is, now I'm planning on my next thing, and here's where I'm going from here. Instead, you're going to discredit what you do. You're going to downplay anything you do. You're going to act like everything is not a big deal when it comes to you, when we continue to have that filter. So it's really important, because you will rob yourself of experiences. You'll rob yourself of healthy relationships. You'll rob yourself of good finances. You'll rob yourself of growth. I mean, there's just like no end to what it's going to take from you, because like Bradshaw said, toxic shame is life destroying. Well, that's part of how it destroys your life. You are limiting yourself now and robbing yourself. And so it's really painful, and it's really hard to sort of understand this without first understanding what went into making. And so if toxic shame and toxic guilt were part of how I was molded, and this is part of how my, brain is now held together, and my emotional state is held together, which it impacts my physical self, then I have to understand toxic shame and guilt first. And then I got to start kicking that stuff out. And then I have to stop accepting it in. So it's kind of like, no, I didn't do that. And you continue to say that, but that doesn't make it true. That's one way that I can just reject that toxic guilt, right? It sounds like you feel bad. I don't, because I didn't do that, right? Sounds like you want me to feel bad because of whatever reason. And you know what? It doesn't even matter because I'm not accepting that. Like, I am totally full of the toxic guilt rocks today. I can't not accepting anymore. Or guess what? I just dumped a bunch of those out. I'm not in a hurry to fill it back up, so no thank you. So part of understanding what went into making you is part of how you get yourself free. And you really got to understand the toxic shame and guilt. As far as shame goes, it's important to talk about the humiliation and to talk about the pain from the humiliation and be able to kick that out. And with the toxic guilt is, what is it I'm believing I've done wrong? You know, is it wrong for me to spend money I saved for this thing? I'm going to say no. So I'm not accepting guilt. But the other part of that, the other side of that coin is we have to learn about emotions. Because if all of my emotions have been this shame and guilt and toxic shame and toxic guilt, well, I probably don't have vocabulary, let alone understanding, to be able to say what it is I'm feeling now. You know, I'm not going to really know how to say, you know, I'm content in this. I feel good about this. You know, this is fulfilling for me. This is something that feels good to me. Those are usually not going to come out of a scapegoat's mouth. So it's really important to educate ourselves on other emotions so that we can build up a vocabulary. So we have a great big pool to pull from, which really is the truth of our experience, because that toxic shame and toxic guilt is a lie. That was all just this great big deception that didn't have any basis in reality, that we've been operating off of some people for over 50, maybe 60 years. And it's such a waste of our time because it was never real. It was never true. So this is why, you know, in the book, it talks about before understanding you were a scapegoat, you were asleep. But now that you start to understand you were a scapegoat, you're starting to wake up. So this whole thing is about waking up and sort of seeing it for what it has been. So again, you can find all of this and more from A Scapegoat No More Forever. And again, the link is in the description. I'll also put some videos up that will help you understand even more about being a scapegoat and also other relational trauma issues. So take good care, and I'll see you in the next one.